I've always been interested in street photography. I discovered documentary and street photography when I was a boy. Cartier-Bresson's always done street photography, and it's one of the first books I discovered. I shot documentary photography myself at first in the Southwest, American Southwest where I lived. I photographed Native Americans and Hispanics. And I was doing commercial work at the same time. I quit doing commercial work, and when that happened, I started doing street photography in earnest. Porto surprised me. It reminds me of Prague when I first went there in 1990. It is an absolutely gorgeous city with beautiful architecture. They call it the unvanquished city here because no army ever destroyed the buildings, no army ever came in here. Napoleon started to come in here and never got this far. And so all of their architecture from all of those years are here, but because of the economics here, a lot of them haven't been kept up. They're starting to keep up this architecture, and when that happens, I don't know if I can afford to be here anymore because it'll be like Paris. It's an absolutely beautiful city. The other thing I like about Porto is that the people are easy to photograph here. They are nice, relaxed, and comfortable, and they're not offended by cameras. Street photography in Porto is possible. Street photography in the UK is barely possible, and street photography in Paris is essentially impossible. It's nice to be someplace where people are proud of themselves and proud of their culture, and they really want other people in the world to know about it. And I've not had any problems at all shooting people here. They're friendly. They, either in the standard street photography where I don't actually interact with them, or in a more personal street photography where I stop and interact with people. People have been wonderful. It's worth coming here to taste this ability to photograph in the streets, which doesn't exist in much of the rest of the world anymore. It varies. It's a matter of each situation. A lot of times, most of the time, I just walk. And when I see something, I photograph it. I don't photograph by thought, I photograph by feeling. And so I walk, and when I see something that brings up a feeling in me, I push the shutter without thinking too much about it. But there are other times when people are just so interesting and so interesting to interact with that I like to stop and spend some time with them and photograph them, visit with them. So it just varies on the situation, but generally speaking, I walk and photograph. I don't plan anything and I don't set things up. I just shoot what I see as I'm walking by. There are a couple of things I notice about younger photographers starting out. Almost all great photographs to me have the photographer in them. You can see the style of the photographer, and you can tell something about their personality. You can tell whether they like people or don't like people. A lot of the stuff I see on Instagram, people have figured out that you can get an interesting black and white picture by playing with light and shadow, which is good sometimes, especially when it's really good. But a lot of the time, there's just no content in the picture. It's just a graphic element. It would be the equivalent to me of the difference between an artist and a graphic designer. And a lot of that photography is just graphic design. There's not an art to it. It's pleasing to look at, but about 400 of those later, it gets kind of tiring. So my advice would be to start looking, and to the people who spend a lot of time taking pictures of themselves, my advice is to start looking at other people and connecting with those other people, and to start recognizing some things about yourself and the things that you're looking at, and then photograph that. Street photography is important to Porto right now because this place needs to be recorded. It's at a tipping point in its history. Part of the city is amazing decay, and the other part of the city is modern, beautiful restoration. It's one of those chances to photograph here to see what things used to be like before the EU, before modernization, before globalization. People are still living here in areas the way they lived probably 50, 100 years ago. And at the same time, the city's quickly moving into the present. And that balance of old and new is one of the great things always to photograph. And I love photographing it, and I imagine that other photographers are going to love it as well.